It's January 20th, 2025. Inside the Grand Rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, colossal paintings immortalize America's defining struggles and triumphs, timeless reminders of the sacrifices that forged the nation's freedom. Standing before these storied artworks is the newly inaugurated President of the United States. Cameras roll. Then applause erupts from some of the wealthiest and most influential figures in the world. Their cheers reverberate off the artwork. A crackle bursts from the microphone, and President Trump leans in and restates a promise he made just months ago.
I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
Words that have resonated from Capitol Hill before. Thunderous clapping drowns out the final words. This bold assertion of American strength electrifies the crowd. Yet hidden behind the patriotic fervor is a quiet but resolute target: Canada, one of America's closest allies. All eyes now turn to the northern border. An alliance that once felt unbreakable stands on the brink of transformation. The question lingers: how will Canada respond to a looming economic onslaught from its powerful neighbor? And what will this clash mean for Canada's future? To grasp the importance of this moment, we need to go back in time to a busy ancient port on the Mediterranean coast. Picture Carthage at sunrise. Ships loaded with olive oil, wine, and rare purple dye arrive at the dock. Phoenician traders watch nervously as a city official steps forward. He demands a fee for each crate brought in, an early version of what we now call tariffs. The traders complain but pay up, knowing it's better to follow the rules than risk losing all of their goods. Fast forward across time and an ocean to the late 18th century. The newly formed United States grapples with how to fund its government and spark domestic growth. In a cramped New York office, Alexander Hamilton obsessively studies trade documents, scribbling notes on how best to shield the fledgling American manufacturing sector from foreign competition. His solution is both simple and revolutionary: impose tariffs on imported goods. By making foreign products pricier, he believes Americans will favor homegrown industries, thus fueling jobs, building national wealth, and bolstering federal revenue. For northern, factory-based states, Hamilton's plan is a hit. Their emerging industries finally have the breathing room to develop without being crushed by cheaper European imports. Jobs multiply and prosperity follows. But down south, the narrative unfolds quite differently. Farmers who export cotton and tobacco and rely on affordable imports watch their costs rise. Worse still, Europe retaliates by slapping tariffs on southern agricultural goods, shrinking profits and feeding resentment towards a system that seems rigged against them. In this tension lie the seeds of a deep regional rift. Tariff policy, originally aimed at safeguarding national interests, begins to carve an economic divide between the north and south of the United States, foreshadowing the clash that will one day erupt into civil war. For centuries, tariffs shaped internal U.S. struggles. But by the 1930s, the impact on America's northern neighbor was about to reach crisis levels. The Great Depression had gripped the world in a stranglehold. Unemployment soared, banks collapsed, and hunger lines stretched endlessly. Within the US, Senator Reed Smoot and Representative Willis-Hawley championed the plan. Raise tariffs on imported goods to protect American farmers and manufacturers. As the bill snaked through Congress, more and more items were added to the list, each placed there by lawmakers seeking to shield favored industries. When President Hoover finally signed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, the legislation raised tariffs on 890 specific products, affecting over 20,000 imported goods. On average, tariffs on dutiable imports increased from about 40 to 60%, making it one of the most protectionist trade measures in US history. Canadian exporters, already bruised by the global economic downturn, reeled in shock. Goods that once flowed freely into American markets, lumber, minerals, crops, and manufactured items, were now subject to steep duties. Panic swept through boardrooms from Windsor to Montreal. Businesses wondered if they could survive being shut out of their largest and most accessible market. Feeling cornered, Canada struck back with its own set of tariffs. A retaliatory spiral followed. Once lively cross-border trade routes slowed to a near standstill, as Smoot-Hawley stood by their bill insisting it would protect American jobs. Even the U.S. agricultural sector began to suffer under Canada's countermeasures. Soon, American egg exports to Canada plummeted by 99%. Automotive, iron, and steel exports shrank by 80%. Families on both sides of the border struggled as the Great Depression deepened. The global domino effect of tariffs chipped away at fragile economies around the world and laid yet another stepping stone towards the conflicts that would engulf the world in the following decade. Jump ahead to a spring morning in Washington, D.C. 2018. Flashes from camera lights streak across the White House briefing room as the Trump administration announces new tariffs. 25% on imported steel and 10% on imported aluminum. The stated rationale is protecting American industries and punishing countries that, in Trump's view, had been taking advantage of the US in trade. Trump framed the tariffs as a way to bolster domestic production and reduce reliance on foreign imports, though he repeatedly mischaracterized how tariffs function, falsely claiming that foreign governments rather than American businesses and consumers would bear the costs. In towns once dominated by steel mills, the news feels like a lifeline. Perhaps this time industrial jobs will return to America. But in Ottawa, officials see betrayal. Canada has long been one of America's top suppliers of steel and aluminum, and these tariffs sting like a slap from a once close friend. Days later, Canada unveils a $16.6 billion retaliation package. Items from bourbon to ketchup to motorcycles, products from politically sensitive US states are now subject to Canadian tariffs. Each targeted good sends a stark message. If you hurt our workers, we'll make your most influential industries feel the pain. The repercussions ripple through American businesses. In Detroit boardrooms, where auto parts flow freely across the border multiple times a day, workers fear job losses. In Kentucky's distilleries, top executives fret that a cherished export, bourbon, will become prohibitively expensive overseas. Meanwhile, farmers from Iowa to Wisconsin, already grappling with low commodity prices, watch Canada's counter tariffs erode their export markets. Publicly, some US officials brush off concerns, labeling these as small skirmishes in an easy-to-win trade war. But behind closed doors, congressional offices are flooded with pleas from companies and labor unions alike. By early 2019, the data confirms everyone's worst fears. Tariffs on both sides are stifling growth. Mounting pressure pushes both nations to negotiate. By May of that year, steel and aluminum tariffs and the corresponding retaliations are lifted, and tensions ease, if only temporarily. One of the enduring lessons from 2018 and the 1930s is how a smaller economy like Canada can harness strategic pressure to compel the United States, an economic giant, to the bargaining table. Rather than slapping tariffs on every US import and making its citizens poorer on all fronts, Canadian lawmakers meticulously crafted a list of goods produced in politically crucial regions. Bourbon from Kentucky, motorcycles from Wisconsin, ketchup from states with powerful congressional representatives and also swing states, all were handpicked to create maximum domestic backlash in the United States. Almost immediately, American businesses began urging the representatives to reconsider. The outcry was swift and well organized. Why jeopardize our industries and our jobs just to settle a trade dispute? Senators and House members soon found themselves in a bind, torn between supporting a presidential initiative and appeasing constituents reeling from the impact. Ultimately, that domestic political pressure grew too strong to ignore. Within a year, an agreement was reached, tariffs were lifted, and the retaliatory measures disappeared. This saga revealed a critical truth. Even a smaller economy can deliver painful reciprocity, forcing the larger power to weigh the domestic consequences of tariffs against any perceived economic advantage. Today, in 2025, the world stands on the precipice of yet another trade war. The newly inaugurated President Trump's pledge to overhaul the American trade system sends tremors through the global markets, and especially across the Canadian border. History suggests the cost of such moves: higher consumer prices, stifled exports, and frayed alliances. As the US toys with isolationism, Canada braces to shore up its energy infrastructure and diversify its foreign export partners. What was once a tight-knit relationship, a seemingly unstoppable partnership between two neighbors, now feels precarious. Haunted by the lessons of Smoot-Hawley and the bruising battles of 2018, with both nations poised to deploy old tactics in a new standoff, the stakes rise beyond mere dollars and cents. It's about pride, sovereignty, and political survival. And if the past is any guide, such battles risk leaving both nations poorer, more divided, and more isolated in an already fragmenting world. The stage is set. A century's worth of lessons warns of the cost of trade warfare. The question that remains: will we heed those lessons or repeat them once again?